If you're here today, it means you're serious about improving your English to a level where you can communicate naturally, confidently, and effortlessly, just like people do in real conversations. Whether you're listening from India, Vietnam, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, or anywhere else in the world. I'm glad you're here. This episode is designed especially for advanced learners who want English to feel less like something they study and more like something they live. Before we dive into today's lesson, take a quick moment to subscribe. That way, you won't miss any of our daily listening episodes that help you sharpen your speaking skills step by step. Every day, we focus on the type of English you actually hear in workplaces, meetings, group discussions, and casual conversations, not the textbook version, but the real version that people use without thinking. Today's episode will take you inside the world of high-level communication. We're going to explore how to express yourself clearly in conversations that move quickly, include many opinions, and require you to think on your feet. These moments happen everywhere in team meetings, in brainstorming sessions, in messages with colleagues, and in conversations where you need to sound both confident and calm. Many advanced learners tell me the same thing. I understand almost everything when listening, but sometimes I struggle to express myself clearly, especially under pressure. If you've ever felt like that, this episode is for you. We'll walk through real conversational techniques that native speakers use every day, techniques that help them stay organized, deliver ideas smoothly, and react confidently even when the conversation takes unexpected turns. You'll learn how to express your ideas in a way that feels natural and structured, make your point without sounding rude or too direct, show agreement, disagreement, hesitation, or uncertainty naturally, manage fast conversations without getting lost, respond to surprising questions without panicking. Guide discussions gently instead of forcing your opinion. These are not fancy phrases. They are everyday tools that real professionals use in international companies, universities, and workplaces around the world. One of the biggest secrets in advanced communication is that your message matters more than your vocabulary. You don't need complicated words to sound intelligent. You need clarity, rhythm, and emotional control. And that's exactly what we'll practice today. Let's begin with a simple but powerful truth. People listen to you more easily when you start with a clear direction. Native speakers often do this without thinking before they explain anything. They give a short orientation sentence that prepares the listener. You've probably heard phrases like, "I just want to share a quick thought. Here's what I'm thinking. Let me explain it from my perspective." Just to give you a bit of context. These sentences are small, but they are incredibly effective. They reduce confusion and make your message easier to follow. Imagine you're in a meeting and you want to add an idea. Instead of jumping straight into details, you can say, "Let me frame this quickly," or "I want to highlight something that might help." Immediately, people know what to expect. They pay more attention. Another natural technique is speaking in layers. Native speakers rarely jump into details. They usually begin with the general idea, then slowly narrow down. For example, the main issue we're dealing with is timing. Here's the big picture. At a high level, this is what's happening. These expressions are common because they prepare the listener's mind. Once people understand the big picture, they're ready for specifics. Let's look at another real-life skill: pacing. Many advanced learners speak quickly when they feel nervous because they don't want to interrupt others or lose their turn. But rushing makes it harder for people to follow your ideas. Native speakers often use short pauses, not because they're unsure, but because they want their message to land clearly. A natural pause tells listeners, "Pay attention, this matters." It also gives you time to think. You don't need dramatic pauses, just a simple rhythm idea. Pause, next idea. Now, let's talk about a skill that advanced learners often forget: signaling transitions. English conversations flow quickly, and people appreciate when you guide them through your thoughts. Simple phrases like, "So, moving on." Another angle to consider. What this really means is now. The key point is, these signposts help you sound organized and confident even when the topic is complicated. One more important idea before we continue: emotional tone matters just as much as vocabulary. Two people can say the same sentence, but one sounds rude while the other sounds professional. The difference is tone. When you want to disagree politely, instead of saying "no, that's wrong," you can say, "I see where you're coming from. Let me share another perspective," or "that makes sense, though I'm looking at it slightly differently." These small adjustments help you sound respectful and confident at the same time. Throughout this episode, we'll explore dozens of real expressions like these phrases that native speakers use instinctively and that advanced learners can benefit from using consciously. By the end of this lesson, you'll not only understand English better, you'll sound better, clearer, calmer, and more confident. When conversations become fast or layered with multiple viewpoints, one of the most useful skills is learning how to steady yourself while the discussion continues around you. Native speakers do this instinctively. They don't panic when someone speaks quickly or when several opinions appear at once. Instead, they rely on simple, stabilizing phrases that buy them a moment to think clearly. Phrases like, "Let me process that for a second," "Give me a moment to think this through," "Let me take a step back here." These expressions sound natural, and they help you stay calm without losing your place in the conversation. They also show that you're thoughtful, not rushed. Something else that native speakers do very naturally is clarify the intention behind what they say. Communication becomes much smoother when you help the listener understand why you're sharing something. You'll often hear phrases like, "The point I'm trying to make is," "What I'm getting at is this," "The reason I bring this up is because." These sentences gently guide the listener back to your main idea, especially when conversations drift or become unfocused. Now, let's talk about handling uncertainty. Because even experienced professionals face situations where they don't have a perfect answer. The key is not avoiding uncertainty, but expressing it in a calm, steady way. Instead of saying, "I don't know," which can sound abrupt or unprepared. Native speakers often say, "It's hard to say at the moment, but here's what we do know. Based on what we have right now, it seems likely that." These phrases maintain confidence while still being honest. Next, let's shift into something extremely important for advanced communication shaping your message so listeners stay with you from start to finish. This is especially powerful in long meetings or discussions where attention begins to fade. One technique native speakers use unconsciously is soft anchoring. This means lightly placing a main point at the start of your message so people know what to listen for. For example, Just to set the stage, here's the main idea. To give some direction to this discussion, here's the core of what I want to highlight. These introductory signals help the listener stay focused as you explain the details. Another natural habit is summarizing before moving forward. You'll hear phrases like, "So just to recap, in simple terms, to put it briefly." Summaries do not make you sound repetitive. They make you sound organized. They create clarity and keep everyone aligned, especially in group settings. Now let's look at navigating disagreement, which is one of the most challenging areas for English learners at advanced levels. When people express different opinions, native speakers rarely respond with blunt disagreement. Instead, they layer their responses to maintain respect and avoid tension. For example, "I hear what you're saying, though I have a slightly different take. That's a fair point. And here's another angle we could look at. I see the logic in that. But let me add something to the mix." Notice that none of these phrases attack the person. They separate the idea from the individual. This creates space for healthy discussion without damaging relationships. Something else that helps tremendously in maintaining smooth communication is recognizing when the conversation is losing structure. In many international meetings, people tend to jump between topics, circle back unintentionally, or explain too many details at once. Native speakers often manage this by gently steering the discussion back on track. Before we move on, let's finish this point first. Let's keep this part clear so we don't mix topics. To stay organized, let me break this into 2 points. These transitions sound natural and show leadership without being forceful. Another powerful communication tool is rephrasing, especially when you sense that your message might not have landed clearly the first time. Instead of repeating the same sentence, you can try, "Let me put that another way. What I mean is this." Another way to look at it is, rephrasing helps bring clarity without sounding repetitive. It also shows flexibility, a quality that high-level communicators are admired for. Let's talk now about something essential to advanced fluency tempo control the rhythm of your speech. Native speakers naturally adjust their speed depending on the complexity of the topic. When the idea is simple, they speak briskly. When it's complex, they slow down slightly, choose their words more intentionally, and pause at natural intervals. Advanced learners often try to maintain one speed throughout the entire conversation, which can make difficult topics harder to follow. Instead, try this. Slow down slightly when introducing a new idea. Pause after key points. Breathe before responding to difficult questions. These techniques make your message more digestible, and they signal confidence. Another skill native speakers use instinctively is giving emotional cues tiny verbal signals that help listeners understand the speaker's attitude toward the topic. For example, "That part surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. What concerns me here is, the good news is." These emotional cues guide the listener, helping them connect with you on a more human level. Communication becomes more than information, it becomes understanding. Next, let's explore momentum phrases, expressions that keep the conversation flowing forward. They help you avoid sounding stuck or uncertain. Some common ones include, going back to what we said earlier. That brings me to another point. Now that you mention it, this connects to something else we should consider. Momentum phrases make your speech smooth and dynamic, very characteristic of C1, C2 English. By now, you can see that advanced communication is not about using fancy vocabulary. It's about making your message feel natural, organized, and easy to follow. And that's exactly what we're practicing throughout this episode, in fast-moving conversations. Another skill that separates advanced speakers from everyone else is the ability to filter information in real time. Native speakers don't respond to everything they hear. Instead, they pick the part that matters most and build their message around it. This is why they often begin with phrases like, "The key thing here is," "What really stands out to me is," "If we narrow it down to the essentials." These expressions help you identify the core idea and prevent you from getting overwhelmed by too many details at once. When you use this filtering technique, your communication becomes clearer not only for your listeners, but also for yourself. You gain control over the conversation instead of letting the conversation control you. Another natural behavior among native speakers is acknowledging the emotional temperature of a conversation. Every discussion has emotional signals: excitement, hesitation, frustration, uncertainty. Strong communicators recognize these signals and respond gently to keep the conversation balanced. That's why you'll often hear phrases like, "I can see there's a lot of energy around this. It sounds like this point is causing some confusion. I get the sense that we're all trying to figure out the same thing." These expressions soften tension, show empathy, and help regroup the conversation calmly. They are especially useful in multicultural settings where tone and directness vary from one culture to another. Speaking of multicultural communication, one hallmark of C1, C2 speakers is the ability to adjust their language to match the listener. Native speakers do this constantly without thinking. If they sense someone is struggling to keep up, they naturally switch to clearer phrasing like, "Let me simplify this. Here's the short version." Basically, what it means is, this is not dumbing down your message. It is respecting your audience. And at advanced levels, respect is one of the strongest forms of communication. Another area where advanced learners usually want improvement is jumping into conversations smoothly. Many people hesitate because they feel like they're interrupting or not choosing the right moment. Native speakers use simple, non-intrusive entry phrases that allow them to join without sounding abrupt. "Can I jump in for a moment just to add something quickly? If I can build on that idea." These invitations let you join naturally and confidently. Once you're already in the conversation, controlling your speaking length becomes important. Long explanations can make you lose your audience. Native speakers tend to keep their points compact unless someone asks for more detail. You can do the same by using phrases such as, "I'll keep this brief. To give a short answer, in a nutshell." Short, controlled phrasing helps your message feel sharp and professional. Let's shift into something even more advanced, handling unexpected questions. These situations can create anxiety because they require quick, organized thinking. Native speakers protect themselves by creating a buffer, a sentence that gives them a moment to breathe without sounding unprepared. Common buffers include, "That's a great question. Let me think about the best way to explain it." "Interesting point. Here's how I see it. Let me take a moment to break this down." These responses sound confident, thoughtful, and composed. Another technique that advanced speakers use is setting boundaries in conversation. You may not always have enough information to give a full answer. You may need more context. You may want to avoid speculation. Instead of feeling pressured, you can say, I'd prefer to look at the actual data before giving a full answer. We might need a bit more information before making a conclusion. Let's not jump ahead. Here's what we know for sure. Boundaries like these protect you from over-explaining and help maintain professionalism. Let's move deeper into real conversational flow, where information moves quickly and decisions have to be made on the spot. Native speakers constantly use phrases that reconnect ideas back to earlier points. This keeps everyone aligned and prevents confusion. Phrases like, as we mentioned earlier, this ties back to our main question. If we connect this with what we discussed before, these are called bridging phrases, a critical part of advanced fluency. Now let's talk about expressing concern without sounding negative. This is something many advanced learners struggle with. When you need to raise a problem, you don't want to discourage others or create tension. Native speakers usually soften their tone. My only concern is, one thing we might want to watch out for is, a small challenge here could be, this creates space for discussion without shutting ideas down. Similarly, when you want to highlight a positive aspect, you can strengthen the tone with phrases such as, the good news is, one strong point here is, what's working well so far is. Emotionally balanced phrasing is one of the markers of C1, C2 communication. Let's now address an area that learners rarely think about: managing silence. Many people feel uncomfortable when conversations become quiet. But native speakers often use silence as a tool. A short pause after an important point gives weight to your message. It tells your listeners, this matters. Think about this for a second. Silence, when used intentionally, is a powerful communication technique that elevates your fluency instantly. Another essential skill is recognizing when your listener is confused even if they don't say anything. Native speakers read facial expressions, tone shifts, and body language to adjust their explanations on the spot. If you sense confusion, you can step in gently. Let me rephrase that. Maybe an example will make this clearer. Here's another way to look at it. These adjustments show awareness and emotional intelligence, two qualities that define expert communicators. Finally, for this section, let's highlight momentum control. Fast conversations sometimes lose structure, but strong communicators keep the flow intact. They redirect gently. Let's stay with this idea for a moment. Before we move on, let's clarify one thing to keep us on track. Here's the main point. Momentum control makes you sound clear, confident, and respected. Another subtle but powerful part of advanced communication is shaping the emotional frame of a conversation. Even when the topic is complex or stressful, native speakers often introduce a calmer, more measured tone to guide the group. They use gentle framing phrases to reduce tension and keep discussions constructive, such as, let's look at this objectively for a moment. Maybe we can approach this from a calmer angle. Let's take the pressure off and break it down step by step. These expressions help everyone reset the emotional energy of the conversation. People listen better when they feel the environment is stable and non-threatening. This leads us into another important area: redirecting conversations without sounding controlling. Sometimes people go off topic, repeat themselves, or bring up unrelated details. Skilled communicators redirect the flow gently. To bring us back to the main point, let's anchor this in the bigger picture. Circling back to the core issue. These phrases do not shut people down. Instead, they guide the conversation back to where it needs to be. A related technique is layered contribution, adding value to a discussion one clear step at a time, rather than overwhelming others with too much information at once. Native speakers often break their thoughts into small, digestible pieces. First, here's what we know. Second, here's what we're unsure about. And finally, here's what we can do next. This structure helps listeners follow your reasoning effortlessly, even in complicated discussions. Another advanced ability is expressing tentative confidence, the balance between certainty and openness. Native speakers use this tone when decisions are not final or data isn't complete. Instead of sounding unsure, they blend careful language with confidence. It seems reasonable to assume that our best estimate at the moment is, this appears to be the direction things are heading. These phrases show that you are thoughtful, analytical, and not jumping to conclusions. Now, let's explore collaborative phrasing language that creates unity in conversations rather than division. In international environments, collaboration is often more important than being right. Native speakers use inclusive language such as, "Let's see how we can solve this together." One idea we might explore is, "We could approach it this way, if that works for everyone." This style builds trust, reduces defensiveness, and makes discussions smoother. Moving forward, we now arrive at a very important skill, expressing disagreement in layers, instead of disagreeing immediately. Native speakers often begin by validating the other person's perspective. That's an interesting point. I can see why you'd say that. There's definitely some value in that idea. Then they introduce their own perspective. Though I'm thinking of it slightly differently. But here's another angle worth considering. And here's where I see a potential issue. This layered approach keeps the conversation respectful, which is essential for advanced communication. Let's shift into smooth conversational transitions. One of the hallmarks of native fluency. When speakers move from one idea to another, they rarely jump abruptly. Instead, they use transition markers. On a related note, that reminds me of something important. Before we wrap up this idea, another piece of this puzzle is, these transitions create flow, helping listeners stay engaged. Next, let's examine how native speakers adjust tone based on context. In stressful moments, they often soften their delivery by lowering their volume slightly, slowing their pace, and using gentler wording. Let's not rush this. We can take a moment to think this through. No need to decide right away. In contrast, when clarity and direction are required, they tighten their tone. Here's what needs to happen next. The priority right now is, let's be very clear about this part. Mastering these tonal shifts helps you guide conversations without raising tension. Now we come to another subtle but important skill, spotting opportunities to contribute. In meetings or group discussions, the best moment to speak is often during a small pause or when the tone shifts. Native speakers use soft entry phrases. Just to build on that, if I could add something here, one quick point before we continue. These are gentle ways to claim your speaking turn without interrupting or sounding intrusive. Let's dive into controlling conversational speed. Conversations often accelerate when people are excited or emotional. Skilled communicators slow the pace by inserting small verbal anchors. One step at a time. Let's pause for clarity. Here's where I think we should slow down. These anchors help prevent misunderstandings and keep the conversation grounded. Another technique used by native speakers is awareness phrasing verbal markers that show you're paying attention to the emotional and logical flow. I hear the concern behind that question. It sounds like we're trying to solve two issues at once. I sense there's some uncertainty here. These phrases make others feel seen and understood, which is essential for building rapport and trust. Now let's examine microaffirmations. Small verbal signals that encourage others to continue speaking. Right, I follow. I'm with you so far. That makes sense. These subtle cues keep conversations fluid and help the speaker feel supported. Finally, to close this section, let's highlight a highly advanced technique anticipating conversational needs. Skilled communicators don't just respond, they watch for what the conversation needs next. They ask themselves, do we need clarity? Do we need structure? Do we need reassurance? Do we need a decision? Then they respond accordingly with phrases like, let's clarify this part first. Here's a simple structure we can use. No pressure. We can take our time on this. Let's choose one direction so we can move forward. This anticipatory style makes you sound organized, confident, and deeply in control of your communication. Another important aspect of advanced communication is the ability to use examples strategically. Native speakers rarely explain abstract ideas without grounding them in something concrete. This makes their message more relatable and easier to understand. For instance, when discussing a difficult concept, they might say, think of it like reorganizing a room so everything is easier to reach. It's similar to when you try to fix one issue, but another one appears right behind it. Imagine you're mapping out a long trip. You need directions before you start driving. These simple, everyday comparisons help listeners visualize the message and stay engaged. They also show that you're able to translate complexity into clarity, a hallmark of C1, C2 communication. Another technique native speakers use is scaling the level of detail depending on the situation. If the listener needs only a general understanding, they provide a broad overview. If the listener asks for more depth, they expand. You can do the same with phrases like, at a high level, here's what's happening. If you want the short version, it's this. To go into more detail. This ability to adjust your depth makes your communication more efficient and respectful of time. Let's transition into something equally important, controlling your presence in a group setting. In conversations with multiple speakers, maintaining presence doesn't mean talking the most. It means contributing in ways that move the discussion forward. Skilled communicators listen actively and speak intentionally. They use small cues to show engagement. That's a useful point. I was thinking the same thing. Let me add something to that. These confirmations create a collaborative environment and establish you as someone who listens thoughtfully. Another advanced skill is balancing conviction with openness. Strong communicators express their ideas confidently while still leaving space for adjustment. Instead of saying, this is the only solution, native speakers often say, from my perspective, the best approach would be, the way I see it, this option makes the most sense. I believe this direction has the strongest potential. These phrases express confidence without sounding rigid or closed-minded. Let's now explore reactive clarity, the ability to respond clearly even when caught off guard. Sometimes people ask unexpected questions or challenge your idea, instead of rushing into an answer. Experienced communicators use a calming strategy. First, they acknowledge the question. That's a fair point. Second, they prepare space for clarity. Let me think that through. Third, they respond with structure. So here's how I'd break it down. This three-step pattern keeps your response steady and professional. Moving deeper. Let's talk about narrative framing. Conversations become more engaging when your message has a beginning, middle, and end, even if it's just a short explanation. Native speakers often use storytelling structures subtly. Here's what happened. This led to something unexpected. So, the takeaway is, this creates a natural flow that keeps listeners attentive and helps them remember your point. Another crucial skill is understanding when to stop. Many advanced learners over-explain. Thinking more words mean more clarity. In reality, clarity often comes from brevity. Native speakers use gentle closing phrases to signal completion. That's the main point. That's all I wanted to highlight. So that's the update for now. This prevents your message from dragging and keeps the conversation from drifting. Let's now focus on tone correction. A subtle adjustment native speakers make when they sense misunderstandings. If their message sounded too direct, they soften it. If it sounded too vague, they sharpen it. You can learn to do this by using simple tone reset phrases. Let me put that a bit more clearly. To be more specific, I didn't mean for that to sound too strong. Tone correction helps you maintain trust and prevents unnecessary tension. Next, let's look at anticipatory reassurance. A technique used to keep conversations calm before conflict even appears. Skilled communicators preempt negative reactions by easing the tension first. This might sound complicated at first, but it's actually simple. Don't worry. We don't need to solve everything right now. This is just one idea. We can explore others too. These reassurances make listeners more willing to engage openly. Another high-level communication habit is shaping the listener's focus. When conversations become crowded with information, you can guide attention to where it should go. What matters most here is the part we should pay attention to is the real issue underneath this is this ability to direct attention is a major component of professional influence. Now let's discuss communicative adaptability, matching your speaking style to the environment. Native speakers shift their approach depending on whether the situation is casual, analytical, emotional, or high pressure. You can adopt similar flexibility by paying attention to how fast others are speaking, how formal or informal the tone is, whether people are sharing ideas or making decisions, whether the atmosphere is tense or relaxed. By adapting intentionally, you become easier to communicate with and more effective in any setting. Another powerful strategy is bridging silence with meaning. Instead of filling every quiet moment with words, skilled communicators allow brief silence to emphasize their point. When they do speak again, they anchor the silence with value. So here's why that matters. And this leads us to something important. Now, let's translate that into action. Silence paired with meaning creates a memorable impact. Let's end this section with relationship-focused phrasing language that strengthens interpersonal connections. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a helpful insight. Thanks for pointing that out. These expressions reinforce respect and collaboration, essential ingredients for effective communication. As conversations become more layered and emotionally complex, skilled communicators begin to rely on depth-guiding techniques, ways of helping the group explore an idea thoughtfully without getting overwhelmed. Native speakers often introduce these techniques subtly. For example, when a topic becomes too broad or too chaotic, they use depth markers. Let's dig into one part of this first. Maybe we should look at the underlying issue here. Let's break this into pieces so it's easier to manage. These phrases invite the group to slow down, focus, and approach the conversation with clarity rather than urgency. Another highly advanced skill is tone shifting for difficult topics. When the subject becomes sensitive, perhaps involving feedback, mistakes, delays, or disappointments, native speakers soften their delivery to prevent defensiveness. They may begin with phrases like, "I want to approach this carefully. This might be a bit delicate, but it's important to mention. Let's talk about this openly but respectfully." By preparing listeners emotionally, they make difficult conversations easier to navigate. This ties directly into constructive feedback, which is one of the hardest areas for advanced learners. Native speakers rarely deliver feedback directly without softening it first. They often use the cushion technique. Cushion, message, support. For example, "I appreciate the effort you put into this. Here's one part we may want to reconsider. And I think we can fix it quickly if we adjust this step." This structure protects the relationship while still delivering the message. You can replicate it naturally with practice. Let's now look at influence phrasing, a technique native speakers use to guide decisions without sounding pushy. Rather than telling people what to do, they suggest direction with phrases like, "It might work better if we..." One option worth considering is, "What if we approached it from this angle?" These expressions open doors rather than closing them, making listeners more receptive. Another advanced communication strategy is strategic repetition with variation, used to strengthen understanding without sounding redundant. Instead of repeating the same sentence, skilled speakers make small adjustments. We need to prioritize this. In other words, this should come first. Put simply, this is our main priority. The idea is repeated, but each version adds clarity. Now let's look at handling layered questions. Questions that contain multiple parts or hidden emotional weight. Instead of responding immediately, native speakers often restructure the question first. So there are two parts to what you're asking. Let me answer the second part first, to clarify. Here's how I understand your question. This gives them control and ensures their response is accurate. Moving on. One of the most powerful yet underused communication tools is reflective listening. When someone shares a concern or an opinion, skilled communicators mirror it gently. "So, what I'm hearing is that you're worried about the timeline. It sounds like the main issue for you is clarity. Let me check if I understood you correctly." Reflective listening shows respect, reduces conflict, and prevents misunderstandings. Let's dive into pressure control, a technique that helps maintain confidence during intense moments. When the conversation speeds up or emotions rise, native speakers anchor themselves with quiet, stabilizing expressions. Let's take a breath and look at this clearly. One moment I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Give me a second to organize my thoughts. These verbal resets keep you grounded and prevent reactive communication. Another nuanced skill native speakers use instinctively is managing expectations. When they sense that someone may be expecting too much or too little, they recalibrate gently. This might take a bit more time than we thought. We may need to adjust our expectations here. Let's not assume we'll have an answer right away. This helps prevent frustration later and builds trust through transparency. Now let's explore the ability to pivot smoothly to change direction in a conversation without sounding abrupt. Skilled communicators pivot by acknowledging the previous point and redirecting naturally. That's helpful. And it brings us to another important issue. I see what you mean, but let's shift for a moment. That's one angle. Here's another way to look at it. Pivoting is especially important in meetings when conversations drift or when a new priority appears. Another subtle technique is vocal anchoring using changes in voice to signal importance. Native speakers naturally slow down on key points, lower their tone slightly, add a short pause before delivering something crucial. These vocal anchors create emphasis without needing to say, "This is important." Let's also address question framing, a skill that helps you gather information without sounding confrontational. Instead of saying, "Why did you do that?" which can sound accusatory, native speakers soften the curiosity. Can you walk me through your thinking? What led to that decision? Help me understand how we got here. The tone shifts from judgment to collaboration. Another powerful technique is cooperative decision language. Rather than pushing your own opinion, you encourage shared outcomes. What seems realistic for everyone here? How can we move forward together on this? What would be the most balanced approach? This strengthens group cohesion and encourages thoughtful contributions. Let's close this section with the concept of conversation scaffolding, building a logical structure as you speak to help listeners follow naturally. Skilled communicators use scaffolding phrases such as, "Here's the situation," "Here's what this means," and "Here's what we can do next." Scaffolding turns even complex ideas into a clear path that listeners can easily follow. As conversations become more dynamic, skilled communicators also learn how to diffuse tension without shutting the discussion down. When emotions rise or disagreements intensify, native speakers often introduce cooling language expressions that lower the emotional temperature. Let's not rush to conclusions. I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let's take a step back so we can look at this clearly. These phrases do not dismiss anyone's viewpoint. They simply create breathing room, which is essential for constructive dialogue. Another advanced technique is redirecting conflict toward collaboration. Instead of letting two opinions clash, skilled communicators reframe the situation as a shared problem. We're actually trying to solve the same issue from different angles. It seems like we both want the same outcome, just with different approaches. How about we combine the strengths of both ideas by redirecting conflict toward common goals? You maintain professionalism and build respect. Let's now look at assertive calmness, a communication style where you remain firm without raising your voice or sounding aggressive. Native speakers use clear, steady language. I'd like to finish my point before we move on. I understand. But let me clarify my position. I hear you, but I see it differently. Assertive calmness is one of the most respected communication traits in international settings. Now, let's explore leadership signaling subtle phrases that show you can guide a conversation without formally being in charge. For instance, here's a simple way we can approach this. Let's outline the options before choosing. We can structure this discussion in 3 parts. These signals tell the group that you're ready to bring clarity and direction. Leadership signaling is not about authority. It's about providing structure, which makes you sound confident and reliable. Another key skill is highlighting momentum. In discussions where people get stuck, native speakers often refocus on progress. We've already made good progress on this part. We're closer to the solution than it seems. Let's build on what we have so far. Momentum creates motivation and keeps the conversation productive. Now let's move into tactful interruption, interrupting in a way that feels respectful instead of rude. Native speakers use softening phrases such as, "Sorry to jump in. Can I clarify something quickly? Just a quick note before we move forward. If I may add one thing here." These expressions allow you to reclaim the conversation without sounding forceful. We also need to examine precision framing, focusing the listener's attention on the meaning you want them to take away. Advanced speakers use clarifying markers. The important thing isn't the number, it's the trend. The real question is whether this approach is sustainable. The key takeaway is that we need a consistent process. Precision framing ensures that your message is understood exactly as intended. Next, let's talk about future-focused language, a powerful communication tool in meetings. Instead of staying stuck in the past or pointing blame, skilled communicators look ahead. What matters now is how we move forward. Here's what we can do next. Let's turn this challenge into an opportunity. This forward motion reduces tension and encourages problem solving. Let's go deeper into balancing clarity with politeness, a skill essential for advanced English speakers. You often need to express a point clearly without seeming blunt. Native speakers achieve this balance with softening strategies. To be honest, I feel we may need to adjust this plan. If I'm being completely transparent, I don't mean to sound too direct, but these soften the impact while keeping the message clear. Another important concept is managing conversational layers. Many discussions include multiple threads at once. Skilled communicators name the layers to keep things organized. There are 2 issues here, the timeline and the process. We're looking at 2 separate questions right now. This seems like a mix of strategy and execution. Naming the layers gives structure and helps listeners stay focused. Let's now shift into audience mirroring, a natural ability native speakers use without thinking. They adjust their tone, speed, or vocabulary to match the listener. You can do this intentionally. If someone speaks slowly, you slow down. If someone uses simple vocabulary, you simplify. If someone is formal, you respond formally. Mirroring builds familiarity, comfort, and trust. Another advanced communication skill is steering vague conversations into clarity. Native speakers often do this by asking targeted questions. What exactly do we need to decide today? What's the outcome we're aiming for? What part of this needs the most attention right now? These questions prevent endless discussion and move the group toward action. Next, let's talk about reinforcing alignment, confirming that everyone shares the same understanding. It's a technique that eliminates confusion and makes collaboration smoother. So we're all aligned on this. Right. Just to make sure we're on the same page, are we all clear on the next steps? These phrases build unity and avoid mistakes. Let's end this section with an extremely nuanced technique tone, maintenance under pressure. Skilled communicators understand that when others become emotional, the best thing they can do is stay steady. They respond with calm markers. I understand this is frustrating. Let's take this one step at a time. We'll figure it out together. Maintaining a stable tone creates psychological safety and positions you as a calm, reliable presence, one of the defining qualities of a C1, C2 communicator. As conversations become more nuanced, one of the strongest abilities you can develop is subtle influence guiding people's thinking without sounding like you're controlling the discussion. Native speakers often do this through gentle, directional phrases. Here's something worth thinking about. One idea that comes to mind is, it might be helpful to consider this angle too. These expressions open the door to influence without closing off other perspectives. They help you lead without dominating. Another advanced skill is idea shaping, taking a raw or unclear idea from someone else and refining it so the whole group can understand it better. Skilled communicators contribute by clarifying, expanding, or polishing the idea. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the core idea is, we could take your suggestion and build on it by, there's a strong point in what you said, we could frame it like this. Idea shaping strengthens collaboration and makes you sound like someone who elevates the conversation. Let's now explore narrative direction, a technique native speakers use to keep long discussions from feeling scattered. They subtly guide the story of the conversation. Let's walk through what led us here. This started with, here's how all of this connects. This creates coherence and helps listeners stay mentally organized, even during complex conversations. Another crucial technique at the C1, C2 level is intentional pausing. When you speak for impact, the pauses matter as much as the words. A well-placed pause emphasizes a key point, gives the listener a moment to absorb information, signals confidence and control, allows your tone to reset naturally. Native speakers often pause right before a significant idea. And that's exactly where things begin to change. Pauses shape meaning. Now let's move to inquiry-driven communication, where strong communicators shape conversations using thoughtful questions. Instead of pushing their viewpoint, they guide the discussion by expanding understanding. What's the biggest factor influencing this? What outcome are we aiming for? What assumptions are we making here? These questions encourage deeper thinking and create intellectual momentum. Another technique is spotlighting, drawing attention to an idea, a risk, or a pattern that others may have missed. There's something subtle happening here. One thing we shouldn't overlook is there's a pattern emerging that's worth noting. Spotlighting demonstrates insight and positions you as someone who sees beyond the surface. Let's shift into collaborative momentum, building, helping the conversation move forward in a productive direction. We're making good progress. Let's keep going. We're getting closer to a solution here. We're narrowing it down nicely. Momentum keeps people engaged and motivated. Another advanced technique is context resetting, used when a conversation becomes confusing or begins drifting. Let's zoom out for a moment. To put this into perspective, if we step back, Here's the bigger picture. Resetting the context brings clarity and gives everyone a fresh starting point. Next, let's talk about verbal highlighting, emphasizing the important parts of your message without sounding repetitive. Skilled communicators often use spotlight phrases. What really matters here is this. The crucial part is, the takeaway is simple. Highlighting ensures that listeners catch the essence of your message, even in complex discussions. We also need to explore graceful hesitation, a technique that allows you to think without appearing unsure. Instead of saying, native speakers often use purposeful fillers. Let me think this through. Give me a second to find the right words. Okay, here's how I'd explain it. These fillers buy time and present thoughtfulness instead of nervousness. Now let's examine reframing, a high-level communication skill that changes the way people perceive a problem. Skilled communicators use reframing to shift the perspective. Instead of seeing this as a delay, we can look at it as a chance to improve the process. Rather than focusing on the challenge, let's focus on how to move forward. Maybe the issue isn't the timeline, it's the workflow. Reframing is a powerful tool because it transforms obstacles into opportunities. Another essential ability is gentle assertiveness, sharing your perspective clearly without creating tension. I respect that view, and here's how I see it. I hear what you're saying, though my experience points me in a slightly different direction. I understand, but I'd like to offer another interpretation. This communicates strength without aggression. Let's move to thought anchoring, where you calmly bring attention back to your core message. The main point I don't want us to lose is, what I want to make sure we're clear on is, the heart of the matter is. Anchoring helps listeners stay centered even when conversations branch out in many directions. Now let's examine forward framing language, which helps people shift into action. So here's what we can do next. These are the steps that make the most sense. Let's turn this into something practical. Forward framing transforms ideas into momentum. Another advanced skill is building resonance, where you connect emotionally with the group using empathetic and grounding phrases. I know this topic can feel overwhelming. It makes sense that we're all unsure here. We've all been in situations like this. Resonance makes your communication feel human and relatable. Finally, let's discuss intellectual humility, a sign of true mastery. Skilled communicators aren't afraid to acknowledge limits. I may be wrong, but here's my understanding. There might be other interpretations, but this is what I'm seeing. I'm open to adjusting this if new information comes in. This type of humility builds trust and opens the door to deeper collaboration. As we move toward the final part of our session, it's important to highlight one of the most transformative communication skills, the ability to reflect on your own contributions while the conversation is still happening. Native speakers constantly do micro-adjustments, subtle shifts based on how others are responding. They notice tone changes, facial expressions, hesitations, and they adapt immediately. You can practice this by asking yourself quiet, internal questions as you speak. Am I being clear enough right now? Does the listener look confused or engaged? Should I slow down or give an example? Is this the right moment to pause? These quick internal check-ins help you stay grounded and responsive, which is what makes communication feel natural rather than forced. Another master-level skill is knowing when to create closure. Conversations, especially at advanced levels, can expand endlessly if no one provides structure. Skilled communicators bring conversations to a meaningful close with gentle, confident phrases. So here's where we stand. This gives us a solid direction. We can wrap this up with one key point. That summarizes everything clearly. Closure gives your message weight. It shows you're not just speaking, you're guiding the flow. Now let's explore something that truly separates advanced communicators from everyone else, the capacity to create calm, even in uncertainty. Great speakers don't try to eliminate uncertainty, they give people confidence while walking through it. They say things like, "We don't have all the answers yet, but we're moving in the right direction. There's still some uncertainty, but we'll take it step by step. We'll figure this out together." These phrases build trust, especially in international teams where clarity and emotional stability matter deeply. Another subtle but powerful technique is to make listeners feel included, especially when the topic becomes complex. Skilled communicators do this by weaving in inclusive markers. Let's think about this from our perspective. We can explore this together. We're all part of this conversation. Inclusion strengthens connection, and connection keeps people listening. Let's take a deeper look at how advanced speakers use emotional texture in their voice. They know how to soften their tone when the moment requires gentleness, and how to firm it slightly when clarity is needed. They don't stay in one emotional register. They shift naturally. That is why a phrase like, "Let's take a breath here," can feel comforting, while a phrase like, "Here's what matters most right now," can feel grounding. This emotional range makes your communication resonate on a deeper level. Another important aspect of mastery is the courage to slow down, even when conversations feel rushed. Beginners speed up when nervous. Advanced speakers do the opposite. They understand that slowing down gives power to your words, allows listeners to absorb meaning, signals confidence rather than fear, creates space for thoughtful dialogue. You can practice this by inserting small, intentional pauses during your next meeting. You'll notice how people begin to lean in rather than pull away. Now, as we bring everything together, let's highlight a final skill communicating with presence. Presence isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it is the quiet, steady confidence that comes from knowing your message is meaningful and your voice has value. Presence shows through in simple things: the steadiness of your tone, the patience in your pausing, the clarity of your phrasing, the respect in your listening, the calmness in your reaction, the thoughtfulness in your explanations. When you combine presence with all the skills we explored today, signposting, pacing, reframing, clarifying, influencing, softening, summarizing, question framing, you begin to communicate not just fluently, but powerfully. And the more you practice these skills, the more natural they become. Eventually, they stop feeling like techniques and start feeling like part of your identity as an English communicator. Before we close, let me leave you with a mindset that native speakers use all the time, even unconsciously. You don't need perfect English. You need English that connects. When you speak with clarity, sincerity, and purpose, people don't listen to your grammar, they listen to you. Every meeting you join, every conversation you participate in, every question you ask is a chance to sharpen your skills and develop your voice. So here's the final takeaway. Be clear, not complicated. Be steady, not rushed. Be confident, not perfect. And most importantly, be present. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you listened all the way to the end, you've already proven that you're committed to mastering advanced English in a real, practical, and meaningful way. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss our upcoming C1, C2 listening sessions, natural dialogues, and deep dive communication lessons designed to help you sound more fluent, more confident, and more natural every single day. This is English in Motion, and I'll see you in the next episode.